Hi everyone, I'm Jack Rambling Raconteur, and I hope that you're doing well. I'd like to share a few thoughts on Here Be Icebergs by Katya Adaui. This is an unnerving collection of short stories, most of which are set in Peru, which is where Adaui is from, and they focus on relationships. More than half of these focus on a single family relationship, quite negative relationships for the most part, because Adaui is exploring what happens when you're part of a family and there's a loss. Perhaps it's through divorce or the loss through death and the grief that is involved in that. Perhaps rather it is the loss of innocence, the betrayal that can occur within the family. And what does it mean to lose that relationship, have it broken or severed, and to still be able to move forward in life? How does one do that? Tethered to the family still, tethered through memories. What does that feel like? The other stories explore what does it mean to attempt to create that type of relationship, to create a family, the found family, as we use in more popular nomenclature now. And those stories can be comic, but equally tragic at other turns. We have sort of relationships that are centered on friendship, but one group of friends is really a criminal gang. We have a relationship between neighbors. We have a relationship between a disgraced politician and the one person who's willing to visit him while he's under house arrest. And so these stories can be quite interesting as Adaui is willing to sort of push at this idea of relationships and cut deeper and deeper into what that experience means. So as an example of the more comic side, the most unforgettable day in the neighborhood, Mrs. Katya says, when Luisa and her family moved in. She was impressed. Luisa stopped traffic. She stopped everything. She would be a distinguished addition. Distinction was something necessary. It was lacking. That much was evidence. She couldn't be the only one annoyed by it. Fruit and vegetable sellers, scrap metal collectors, hawking their services. Ugh, such a grating nasal tone. She wanted to ring her husband at work, tell him about it right away. He had told her, "You're only to interrupt me again if it's very important." This was important, very. She would start by piquing his interest. She had a real talent for this. You should see this new woman who's just moved in next door. And so we see very quickly Mrs. Katya is unhappily married. There are really no happy marriages among these stories. And so she's going to conjure this new relationship with her neighbor Luisa, who seems like this incredible person. Everybody stopped to pay attention. And we see that, as I said, comic turns that relationship will take. But also, what does it mean to attempt to create a relationship and then fail at it? That's the avenue Adaui is willing to explore. On a more tragic side, though, we have a story like We the Shipwreck that opens, "My father and I have become gorillas. The hospital an island. I shout to him, 'Come on, comrade, we've got to keep on fighting until the end.' Apart from his beard and all the excitement, there is nothing revolutionary about our dream. I persist on the side of the living, while my father lists his wishes, which grow smaller and more ridiculous. He grows irritated, glances towards the window, says, 'Now clear off.' I go back home. The city breathes silence." And so we have a story here where there's a narrator whose father is terminally ill. And we see the narrator and father, and how do they, in a sense, say goodbye to each other? And how does the narrator react to other family members who have either already sort of said goodbye and are done with this member of their family who's not going to be around in the very near future, or who are sort of unwilling to face the idea that they need to say goodbye, that are going to sort of just operate as if nothing has happened. And what does that feel like to be in that experience? And that ultimately is an experience that Adaui is very open throughout the pages, that in a sense we all will reach that point. We will all come to the end of our lives. And how do we deal with that? And how do we deal with the fact that those around us are reaching that at some point? And she's very frank in those explorations. That story ends with, "I still haven't taken care of Dad's ashes. When he was alive, he hated his ashes, the ones from his cigarettes. What would he have done with my dead body? He would have gathered all the ashes together. You and my cigarettes are the things I love the most. He tried to stop smoking for me. I tried to start for him. Look," he said from his hospital bed, "the ceiling over there. Those lights, they look like New York, don't they? In Times Square in 1951, my father smoked a cigarette. This is documented in a photograph inside a suitcase I can no longer open. Soon it will be beach season. One more summer, I promised my father. When I throw his ashes to the winds, will his body shape itself again upon the sand? Will I close his eyes once more to protect them from the light?" And it's such a beautiful, elegiac end to that story, to that that family. And it is tragic, but there's something quite beautiful and poetic. The images that Adaui conjures in the stories are very important because she focuses on the idea that we take small objects or we have memories that tether us to our families, and we hold on to those. They almost become these totems. And that's something that's very real. There are people who will keep an ancestor's pipe, even though they don't smoke. There we have our snapshots of family members, or old jewelry, rings. And that is something that's truly like something we possess. And we hold on to that because in a sense, it allows us to feel like we're holding on to the person and to the memory and to what that meant in our lives. And so she really goes in for that. One of the stories, the very first story, is just a series of memories that descend deeper and deeper and deeper into the recesses of this person's life until the final paragraph is the first memory this person has as a child. And so those are the avenues that Adaui is exploring in most of these stories. But there's one more that's almost surreal in how bizarre it is, where a family is so confronted with some intruder that's going and like wrecking their garden and destroying all the fruit and smearing stuff on their house. And they bring in experts to deal with it. And this is ultimately where the direction they go. The youngest son shut himself up in the bathroom. Nobody protested. He practiced making faces in front of the mirror, the whole gamut from shock to terror. He opened his eyes and stretched his mouth open wide until it hurt. Is this what fear would be like? If someone saw me grimacing in the bathroom, they could say, "It's you, it was you all along." He thought about the antlion he had led to its death as a boy and understood with irritated surprise that he had left his childhood behind a long time ago, that he was alone. If only we could hide in an attic and come out once the conflict was over. Why does this have to happen to us? And why now? The older son had been hounded by a night terror in primary school. Like an interrupted dream that resurfaces hundreds of nights later and continues, the memory came back to life. He was in the family small holding, standing by a scarecrow. Someone was inhabiting it and held his gaze. A singular invention, the scarecrow. Its spine is a broom. Dress it in your own trousers and shirt. Stitch a crimson curve for its mouth. Stick it in the ground. Set it up all smiles amid the loneliness of the crickets. In order to scare, first attract. In its eyes lies the truth. The older son is suspicious still of the scarecrows on whose arms crows come to roost. What if someone thinks that the man in the scarecrow is me? And they're each trying to figure out how will they be able to defend their small family garden and farm? How will they be able to fend off this intruder? And the avenue that story goes down is really quite extraordinary. So this is a collection I'd recommend, but I recommend it with one caution. These are stories that are very frank about the despair that can occur when trust and relationships are violated within the family. There is physical violence and physical abuse. There's sexual abuse in one of these stories. There is suicide mentioned in a couple of stories, very directly. And so this is a set of stories to tread cautiously towards, but they do tap into a very universal aspect of human experience, and I highly recommend them. And one story in particular goes into Adaui exploring the way that her ancestors came from Italy to Peru, which is where she grew up and where her family had come from. So it's really quite extraordinary to see her explore that side of her own sort of deep memory as well. But these are very good stories. As I was reading them, I was reminded of some of the great short story writers that dealt with so many of those same themes. A writer like Joy Williams in Taking Care, one of the sort of unsung collections of short stories from the 20th century, where we are exploring things that seem so normal and so universal, and yet the way Williams writes and the way that she gives the little twists and turns, the sensibilities, are extraordinary. Certainly I was reminded of the families in Die My Love by Ariana Harwitz, and just the absolute horror story that is that family. A couple of the stories, in the way that they were very frank with dealing with shattered relationships, with dealing with sort of the fear that accompanies that, reminded me of Selva Almeida's Dead Girls. And there's something about some of the stories that felt very close to noir. There's only one story in which a crime is committed, and yet so many of the stories have this sensibility that feels very close to like the crime, psychological crime novels from the 1940s, 1950s. Writers like Dorothy Hughes and In a Lonely Place would be one of the great examples of that. Thinking of other short story writers, something like Harold Brodkey's early collection, First Love and Other Sorrows, and then Emily Prager's A Visit from the Footbinder. These are both collections that feel, they plumb the depths of human emotion and focus on those relationships, and yet at the same time have a very acute and strange sensibility, as with Joy Williams. Additionally, the stories of Ryunosuke Akutagawa, those of R.K. Narayan in Malgudi Days, And one that collection I'm very excited to get into over the next month will be The Dogs of Tithwal by Sadat Hasan Manto. This will be a collection I'm reading like one from every night over the next probably 3-4 weeks. There are specific references to the Duino Elegies from Rainier Rilke. And the way that the relationships were explored, especially the family relationships, and the way that a death in the family haunts characters across the course of a generation, really reminded me of what Charles McCarry did in The Last Supper. This is a spy novel, but it's a spy novel that is sprawling and focused on the ramifications of like a generation of characters whose parents were spies and now they are as well, and what is all of that sense of deceit and betrayal and loss of trust, what as children, how did that affect them as adults? So this was a collection that I really liked from Here Be Icebergs. So hope everybody's having a great week. Thank you.